Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to Sports Today. It is very much that time of the day when we bring you all of the latest news updates that would have happened at least when you were either asleep, maybe catching up on some rest, or which happened just a little while ago, as is going to be the case in this particular video. So without further ado, let's quickly check in on some of the more interesting things or the interesting happenings from the world of sport that have been taking place. Without further ado, let's just get into what exactly it is, that has been happening. So one of the first major interesting things that we have to talk about is that after India's, series clean sweep against New Zealand, Rohit Sharma was quizzed on when exactly would this man, Jasprit Bumrah, be available for selection for India again. And truth be told, the update which he gave you wasn't exactly a very positive one as of now, and it does seem like that there's not really that much clarity on when exactly we can expect to see India's premier pace bowler back in action. In fact, the exact quote that Rohit said was that, look, we're not too sure about Bumrah. We hope that he can play the last two tests against Australia, and we don't want to take any risks with him as back injuries are always critical. We have a lot of cricket coming back after that. We're in constant touch with the physios and the doctors in the NCA, and the medical team will give Bumrah as much time as he wants. Now, it's obviously an understandable stance to take, especially when you consider the fact that they had rushed Bumrah back to fitness before the World Cup because they felt that, look, we need him for the World Cup, and then he ended up contracting a far worse injury. So at this point, you don't want to be taking any risks with a player of Bumrah's caliber. In fact, one of the reasons that you can afford to actually ensure that Bumrah comes back in due course is due to the fact that India have had one particular pace bowler perform very, very well in the recent times, and that man, of course, is Mohammad Siraj. Siraj has been a man in fine form throughout the ODIs against both Sri Lanka and New Zealand. And the number of people who are able to see just how good he's been in recent times has been growing, as former India cricketer Sanjay Manjrekar also acknowledged that whilst he probably wasn't talked about as much during the New Zealand series due to the sheer fact that you had players like Gill scoring tons and double tons and obviously, stealing the spotlight, he did mention that Siraj is one of those players who will be there for India when you need him the most. In fact, what exactly he said was that in the post-match, Siraj was hardly mentioned or talked about. But yes, when I have to look at one player who's promising a lot, a player whose growth has been phenomenal, then I have to look at Siraj. And I've used this term many times. At the moment, he looks like a complete seam bowler. And that says a lot about any performer, not just in this format, but T20Is and Tests as well. He also further went on to add that Siraj is someone who looks to be one of those big game players who will be there and put his hand up for India when they need the most. High praise indeed, but it also goes to show you just how well this man has been performing in recent times. Shifting our focus from the world of cricket to the world of football, and Lazio ended up registering a 4-0 thrashing over AC Milan in a Serie A match that took place last night. Now, why exactly is this big news? Is because, well, Milan, who are the defending champions but currently in second place, are now very much looking unlikely to retain the title that they won so well last year. And Lazio currently sit third in the Serie A table, and they're ahead on goal difference of both their local rivals Roma as well as 2020-21 champions Inter Milan. So there's plenty of movement, and there's plenty of people vying for those four spots, those four Champions League spots in Serie A. Lazio currently in a very, very good position, but AC Milan, despite being second, mind you, are only a point behind Lazio, which goes to show you just how tight it is, and more importantly, just how competitive the Serie A has been this year. If you're a fan of course, football in general and a good underdog story, it'd be fun to see how far Lazio can go from here. But a 4-0 win over the defending champions, massive, massive indeed. Speaking of defending champions who in this case were almost about to lose a match, Bayern Munich were on the cusp of losing a match to FC Cologne of all teams. Now, that's no disrespect to Cologne, but Cologne are a mid-table side at best in the Bundesliga, and they looked very, very likely to register an upset 1-0 win over Bayern Munich. That is, of course, until this man, Joshua Kimmich, ended up scoring a late equalizer to ensure that Bayern at least got away with 1 point. But the expression on the faces of the Bayern players tells you the entire story. They knew for a fact that this was a match that was there for the taking. Unfortunately, they could not win, and it was a poor indictment of just how their performance was, because they dominated possession but weren't able to create too many chances, or more importantly, convert the ones that they did. Sticking to football news, and of course, we're talking about the Carabao Cup, which is England's second domestic tournament. The semi-finals of that tournament are upon us, and this man, Joe Linton, gave Newcastle United a 1-0 lead going into the second leg of the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. Now, the match was being contested against Southampton, who you'll remember it shocked Manchester City to make it to the semis, but for Newcastle, the 1-0 lead is a massive thing. Why? Because it was an away win and because they've been undefeated in the last 12 games at their home stadium at St James's Park. So it does seem very likely that Eddie Howe's men could be heading to the finals of the Carabao Cup, but we'll only know that for sure once the second semi-final is played, and that will be happening next week. Shifting our focus now from the world of football to the world of tennis, and we finally have our first two semi-finalists for the Australian Open in the women's singles division. So Arna Sabalenka is the first of those. She ended up beating Donna Vekic in a heavyweight clash, but it was a pretty one-sided match because Sabalenka won 6-3 and 6-2, and she will now be taking on in the semi-finals. She'll be facing Magda Linette, who surprised everyone by beating Karolina Pliskova 6-3, 7-5. Now, Linette, remember, is not a seeded player, whereas Pliskova was. So, massive upset for the Pole. Can she keep it going? That's something we'll only know once the semi-final is there, but we now have two semi-finalists in the women's singles draw, and later today we'll also know the semi-finalists of the men's singles as well, because you'll have Novak Djokovic in action. Stay tuned to Sports Today. We'll be bringing you the updates from that. For now though, let's shift our focus to another sport that has been happening in India: hockey. And speaking of course, semi-finalists, we now have our first two confirmed semi-finalists in the Hockey World Cup that's currently taking place in Odisha. So the two semi-finalists are, but perhaps of no surprise to any of you, Australia and Belgium. Now, Australia ended up defeating Spain in the semi-finals and the quarterfinals to make it through, whereas Belgium ended up defeating New Zealand. So it's obviously a massive deal for both these teams, and both of them really come in as favorites. Who exactly it is they'll face? Well, that hasn't been determined yet. But what we know is that Australia will face the winner of the match between Germany and England, whereas Belgium will be taking on the team that wins the clash between Netherlands and Korea. So obviously, massive days still ahead in, of course, the FIH Hockey World Cup, and it does seem likely that we could be set for some truly blockbuster clashes in the semi-finals. That is, of course, assuming the favorites end up going through. And that's it for this edition of the Morning News Update from Sports Today. Thank you all very much for joining us. As always, if you enjoy our work over here at Sports Today, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon so you know when we're going live or uploading a new video, and don't also forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Last but not least, don't forget to download the Sports Tech app and check out the website in both Hindi and English as well. Thank you all once again for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and don't forget to stay tuned to Sports Today as we bring you the latest from the world of sport. For now though, this is Shane Dice signing off. Goodbye for now.